Procrastination, the art of putting unimportant tasks ahead of more important ones to get a quick sense of fulfillment and immediate satisfaction. This is something that everyone goes through, and some of us believe that procrastination is an inherited character flaw, and we try and fail to get rid of this very unproductive habit. But before we come up with solutions, I'm going to make a case for procrastination and why it can ultimately be a good thing. You see, resisting doing what you initially set out to do is great feedback, because it's your brain literally telling you that you haven't put enough thought into whatever it is you plan to do, and thus decides to do something else that gives you immediate results. Our brain has a hard time understanding why we would ever do something that doesn't give us immediate satisfaction, like starting a new painting, over something that does, like organizing your shelf or going through your email. So we end up doing these unproductive tasks instead. Okay, now while this is very interesting, how does it help us to stop procrastinating? Well, if you know that you are currently procrastinating, the best thing you can do instead is do nothing. Let me explain. Not doing anything isn't procrastinating because, as I said, procrastination is replacing difficult high priority tasks with easy low priority ones. So before you do any important task, sit down for 10 to 15 minutes, preferably away from your computer, and think about how to tackle what it is you're trying to do. Let's use starting a new painting as an example. I'll sit down for 15 minutes and think about what the painting will be about, what angles the camera should be at, or what interesting lighting scenarios I'd like to try. The point is to give me a clear visual to work with, instead of staring at that vile and hideous white canvas for 30 minutes before deciding to go on Instagram. Having a concrete plan will definitely help with procrastination, but this isn't the only cause, and there is a far more insidious reason for procrastinating. Motivation. Motivation is a great tool, as it gives us the push we need to work on our important tasks. So obviously, being motivated would help us beat procrastination, right? Not really. And I know that this sounds counterintuitive, but motivation actually increases procrastination, because too much motivation transforms into pressure, and our brain tries to avoid this pressure that we put on ourselves by doing literally anything else. This is why I'm not a fan of the artist's deadline, where you give yourself a specific time and date to become a professional artist, or else. A moderate amount of motivation is great, but too much of it can make you less productive, so just keep that in mind. Now, I've talked about beating procrastination and getting started on our most important tasks, but what about the middle of the road? How do we keep ourselves engaged while we are working? Let's take a look. Using the same example of the painting, after a couple of days, the moderate amount of motivation and the excitement of starting a fresh piece is all but gone. And we are left with this half-finished mess that we know we have to get done. Here is an important tip to deal with it. Train yourself to produce and literally get high on dopamine. I know that this sounds strange, but it's the best way to increase productivity and beat procrastination. Our body naturally releases dopamine, which is highly addictive whenever you succeed in completing a task. It is that feeling of accomplishment you get when you complete a week-long piece or project. But the problem is, we only get this sense of pleasure, this release of dopamine at the end when the task is completed, and not during the creative process when we need it the most. And so, your brain beckons you to switch to a simpler task that will release dopamine faster, and thus you procrastinate. And it's quite simple to train yourself to get this sensation of accomplishment. Just take whatever large and important task you plan to accomplish and break them down into smaller tasks that you can keep track and tick off when completed. Each task should take as little as 20 minutes to an hour to do, and they must also be simple enough to be completed in a single work session. And always make a point to celebrate every single task that you complete. It could just be as simple as crossing or ticking the task off your list. It's really that simple, but as with everything else, it takes practice and discipline to keep doing this every single day until it becomes second nature. And again, to use the painting as an example, we can divide our schedule into tasks like fixing the issues with the hand, finish the background, study a similar pose and apply it, or add more details to the clothing, for instance. At the end of the day, procrastination might have an intimidating name, but it really isn't all that tough. And hopefully with the tools in this video, you can defeat procrastination and go on to create something truly wonderful for the whole world to admire. I'm Stylesosunde and this has been ARTFLOW. And remember, eat, sleep, art. Bye! I do it for the love, yes I do. So you don't care about the money, well yes it's true. And